After a disappointing and downright concerning start to the season by the Philadelphia Phillies bullpen, the group seems to be finding themselves a little bit and getting back on the right track. I want to break down the recent changes that have gone down for several of the key arms in this bullpen and why I have some increased optimism for what this unit could ultimately look like when the biggest moments matter and we are in playoff time there. There is help on the way from the inside this Phillies team as we begin to shake up how these arms do fall. I'm not saying that I am 100% certain that this bullpen is as designed or ready for a playoff run currently, but I'm very encouraged by the version of them that we've seen these past couple weeks. And I'm starting to believe that may be the more true version of them than the struggles that we did see at the start of the year. Do want to dive into exactly why that is, but before I do want to remind you guys to make sure you are hitting that subscribe button. That at this point in time, just 29.7% of you guys watching that's videos, that is all who has subscribed to us here on Phillies Digest. So if you have not already, make sure you're hitting that button. It helps us out a ton here, and we have a lot of good baseball still to get into. Now, to dive into some of the improvements that we've seen on this Phillies team, this is not stuff we're going to be jumping for joy just yet. That shout out to Bob Wankel of Crossing Broad here, who tweets out, the Phillies bullpen ERA has dropped from 29th to 25th this week. And I get we are not writing home about, moving up from the second to worst to fifth to worst ERA from a bullpen here, but a couple other stats that I think are a bit more telling. They rank 13th in the MLB in WAR, 9.14 strikeouts per 9 innings, which ranks 11th, 14.8 strikeouts per walks, which ranks 13th, and a 320 BABIP, which ranks 25th there. So this suggests more of a middle of the pack group than the downright horrid production that we've got for a good portion of this season. Now, there's a couple reasons why I have optimism here. For starters, there are guys just finding themselves again. Jordan Romano, a guy that was looked at as one of the prized bullpen additions, certainly looks like a better version of himself in recent weeks. Now, I'm not ready to be fully locked in on the Jordan Romano experience. I will give a shout out to my guy Luke Arcaney, my co-host on this channel, who is bought in. He's ready to buy every bit of stock he can get on Romano at this point. I'm not there yet, but there are guys that are beginning to win me over, and I do want to talk about Joe Ross specifically here. So another guy that was a free agent acquisition here, and you can see a pretty night and day difference for where his season turned. That ultimately, looking at game one here, a struggle. He pitched just one inning, gave up one earned run, had a walk, allowed a run, had one strikeout there. It did get worse moving forward that we saw in game two. Ultimately, a clean inning there with one strikeout. And then ultimately where things fall apart is in his fourth and fifth appearances here. We see his earned runs allowed, one in that game, two in the following, and then 4 runs in his 7th appearance, that against the San Francisco Giants there. But since that point, he has gotten his act together and cleaned things up. We were talking about I believe 6 straight appearances of scoreless efforts from Joe Ross, including ones where he's looked pretty filthy on the mound. And it's been kind of strange to me, the archetype of pitcher that he is, and really not having the category that the Phillies did have in mind. When there first was the signing, it was sort of my expectation that this could be a little bit of their flex guy in the bullpen that could go multiple innings. Now, granted, to his credit, we have seen a little bit of that he did pitch 2 innings against the Nationals the other night, 1.2 against the Braves there. He did go 3 innings against the Mets there. So we've seen a little bit of that. But I also think there's a world where we're starting to talk ourselves into him developing to a little bit more of a high leverage arm in the bullpen here. Now, to add a little bit that I did want to touch on here, I did just want to look at the outright depth chart of this bullpen. So the names may not be as, blow you away as you would hope in these cases, but the production is starting to get there. Jose Alvarado, do want to give him credit, has been pretty excellent. I didn't love Rob Thomson leaving him out for the second inning in the 10th, second inning in the 10th inning, is that game with the extras the other night. Did not feel like one of those days where Jose had it, and we, ultimately they struggled as a result of that. That did end up being a loss. I do give the team props for battling. I believe they put up 8 runs in that matchup, which is something that I think we should be way more thrilled about than any sort of pitching deficit or loss in that matchup there. But Jose Alvarado, while he will have his rocky stretches where the control is a factor, he's been very good this season. A guy that I think is, when he's clicking, is truly one of the most dominant pitchers in all of baseball, and I love that we've seen that at a pretty regular rate this year. Romano, again, we will have this conversation after a bit of a larger sample size to me. I'm not there. That there's something about like him on the mound that I just don't have confidence in quite yet, but the stuff has certainly been better. The production has been better. He's hitting his spots at a higher rate, and again, the actual results are speaking for themselves. Matt Strahm, a guy that we should have no doubts in, has been an all-star, was an all-star last year, and has a pretty good chance of having another chance at that this season. So Strahm, when push comes to shove, will continue to be one of, if not the highest leverage arm in this bullpen. Orion Kirkring is where there is a bit of a conversation here. Now, there are the Kirkring alarmists that are certainly concerned about him. And to be completely fair and neutral here, while I'm a Kirkring guy and do believe in him as a talent, we do have to acknowledge he has not looked like the best version of himself this year. And when you are a two-pitch pitcher, as Kirkring essentially is, when one of them is not hitting, and it's been his slider for him this year, that is a problem. That you come pretty easy to hit, that you can just lay off those, sit on the fastball, and then do some damage when that thing crosses the plate. That has been happening to Kirkring a decent bit this year. I think we forget how young this guy is sometimes when you think of the rapid rate. One of the fastest rates I've ever seen a prospect rush through the majors. I believe he pitched in 3 regular season games before being thrown to the fire and pitching in the postseason for this Phillies team. I have a little bit of leniency for him. He will find himself. He's still a guy that has the nasty stuff and has looked like one of the better relief pitchers in baseball in the overall sample size of his career. He's going to be just fine. He will find it, but I certainly get the concerns here. Joe Ross, who I just mentioned, I'm buying in. I'm buying the Joe Ross stock there. I do believe in this. Tanner Banks hitting 94 with his fastball. I love the little mustache. I love the socks pulled up to the knees there. I'm becoming a little bit of a Tanner Banks guy and have been pretty satisfied. And the other point that I did want to point out here is when speaking about the Phillies bullpen, it is impossible not to acknowledge the starting rotation. Not only is there a pretty convincing case at this point that the Phillies have the best 1 through 5 starting pitching in baseball, it's really the Dodgers is the only other team that I can hear the case for. And while they might have more, outright just raw number of arms there, when you're just talking about 5 guys, I find it hard-pressed to believe that there shouldn't be more confidence in this Phillies unit here. We are seeing each of these guys find themselves again. Aaron Nola finally looks to be back on the right track. Zack Wheeler, and recording this before he pitches against the, I believe, Tampa Bay Rays today. I forgot to check that exactly. But, we know who he is as the ace of this team. Jesus Luzardo has exceeded expectations. Ranger Suarez looked like himself to me. I understand he did not get the result that we hope for, and he will find himself a little bit more than that was the best example of it. But I was impressed with Ranger. I love him. I'm very happy that he's back in the rotation, and obviously beyond that is where the conversation gets to be interesting. We saw Taijuan Walker move to a bullpen role already. I don't think that is any sort of, we believe we can get a high level of impact out of Ty, but he's got to go somewhere, and there may be some games where you need him as a burner arm to just throw a couple innings there. When looking ahead to the actual playoffs, the starting pitching rotation is cut down a little bit, and some of these guys are going to be jumping in the mix. It does feel like Ranger is going to be a name there, but I also wanted to talk a little bit of Andrew Painter in this conversation. All 6'7" of Andrew Painter, throwing 100 miles per hour, I think would be a pretty dangerous weapon to unveil in the postseason. I get the concept of wanting to keep him in a routine, and they do have to think big picture for his development. What is best to get a taste of it? But from a pure playoff perspective, that is an arm that I do think is pretty likely to be added to the bullpen and could make a massive difference overall. The heat that he throws at his size is pretty intimidating. The more that I've seen, and again, I've just seen kind of some of the highlights. We have not seen him against major league hitters to this point yet, but I'm starting to really believe in the Andrew Painter experience. And again, more of these names. We could be talking about Luzardo being a name out of the pen, although I think you can make a case that he's been their second best starter straight up this year, even first straight up, that he's currently leading the team in WAR. Luzardo's been excellent for this Phillies team. So there is a little bit more flexibility. And I do think when we shift things out and cut down this actual starting rotation to what will be from a postseason setting, those leftover names being added to the bullpen mix change the way it looks by a pretty notable margin. Now, there is still a marathon of the regular season that they need to get to, and I'm still interested in taking a swing on a couple arms at the deadline. They don't have to give the top dollar, but sort of as they did last year with a guy like Carlos Estevez. Estevez wasn't perfect. He had his flaws, and frankly, he was a little bit underwhelming on my overall takeaway there, but that is still the type of player they should be taking chance on, and I do believe Dave Dombrowski will step right into that driver's seat once again. So shout out to the Phillies bullpen for pitching at a much higher level of late. And I did want to note also that they seem to be having a little bit of fun out here. Shout out to Ty Daubert, who tweeted, Phillies relievers are playing a new game in the bullpen that they're writing down guesses for the attendance at Citizens Bank Park, the closest without going over wins. Quote, at the end of the year, we will see who has the most baseballs and go from there, Tanner Banks said. So the vibes seem to be increasing within the bullpen as well, which I do love. It is a pretty lonely spot out there for those guys who are just taking in the game with just their little unit there. So I'm happy that this is beginning to progress in the positive direction. Still a lot more questions than answers about this Phillies team overall, but I did want to point out there is a nice chance for them to change their perception of them at a pretty notable rate. Our guy Luke Arcani tweets out, the Phillies have a real chance to win some games in May and bolster their record. Here are their opponents: 3 at the Rays, 3 at the Guardians, 3 versus the Cardinals, 3 versus the Pirates, 4 at the Rockies, 3 at the Athletics, 3 versus the Braves, and 3 versus the Brewers. Only 2 of those teams are currently above 500 with Cleveland and the Athletics, and teams like the Rockies have been especially dreadful. So a good opportunity for this Phillies organization to rip off some wins, begin to assert themselves as one of the true threats across Major League Baseball, and I think it is pretty clear that they have not played their best baseball even to this point. So it's been a fine start to the season. There is no need to panic by any means, but I think there is another couple levels that this Phillies team will go on as the season continues to progress. But let me know what you guys think with that, and do want to hear your thoughts on the bullpen. Are you as relieved as I am, or are you still a little bit worried about this unit as a whole? Let me know in the comments. And once again, do want to remind you guys to make sure you are hitting that subscribe button. That's 70.3% of you guys watching these videos have not subscribed to us here at Phillies Digest just yet. So make sure you're hitting a button, drop a like on this video, and I'll be back talking to you next time. Peace.